especially if you don't have the stringing instructions from the manufacturer. We're lucky in this case because this is one of the narrow bedroom window blinds that only has 2 strings, one that runs up each side. Wider windows have 4 strings, one on each side all the way over at the edge, and 2 that run up the middle. These wider window blinds have a considerably more complicated stringing pattern, so be sure to pay careful attention if you're doing one of these. Let's start by removing the handles that you use to open and close the blinds. Using a small flat blade screwdriver, pry open the attachment that connects the cord to the wall. Now pry out the plastic end caps on both sides of the blinds. There are 3 on each side, and then simply pull them off. We're now ready to disassemble the blind. Starting up at the top, you can simply slide the aluminum track off of the blind. Once the top track is removed, you can see where the strings connect at the top of the blind to a small spring. If you don't have a diagram from the manufacturer showing the pattern that the string should follow through the blind, now's the time to carefully draw a diagram as you disassemble it. On a white sheet of paper, we're simply going to draw the path that the cord takes across the top of the top section of blinds and down to the center. That traces the path across and down to the center track, right here. Now let's slide the lower half of the pleated blind off of the upper half. Once we've slid those apart, we can see that our cord takes an X pattern, with the right side crossing over to the left and vice versa. Let's draw that on our diagram to make sure we know the correct path for the cord to take in the middle of the blind. Now slide the lower track off the bottom of the blind. Now we can see the rest of the path that the cord takes. Comes straight down through the lower section and crosses over to the opposite side. Let's take our diagram and make sure that we show that the cord then comes from the center down to the bottom, but crosses out to the opposite side. Since restringing the blind correctly is so important, I've redrawn this to make it as clear as possible exactly the path that the cord will take. Again, we can see from top to bottom that our cords connect at the spring at the very top, go straight down the sides of the upper section of the blind, cross in the middle, go straight down through the lower section of the blind, and cross again at the bottom, going out to the attachment points at each side. This seems like a simple stringing pattern, but once you've taken the cord out, if you don't remember exactly what it should be, you won't be able to put it back together correctly. And the wider blinds that use 4 vertical lines are much more complicated and require great care before dismantling. This is a diagram we created for the large blinds in our motorhome. Again, following our diagram, cross the cords between the upper and lower sections of the blind, and then thread the cord through the lower section of the blind exactly as you did in the upper section. Now you can see we have our spring on top and the top section threaded, our cords crisscrossed in the middle, and our lower section threaded. But now we have to connect the upper and lower sections of the blind. Here's how to reattach the 2 halves of the blind. Take the upper half and the lower half and slide them along each other until you can slide one inside the other. Hold the cords taut and make sure that they lie properly inside the track along the bottom of the upper section. And now slide the lower section into the upper section, pulling the excess cord as you go. Now the upper and lower sections are reconnected with the spring on top and the 2 cords coming out the bottom. Our diagram reminds us that at the very bottom of the blind, the cords need to cross back to the other side. Let's take our cords, cross them left to right and right to left, and then slide our lower track into place. Holding both the cords and the pleats of the blind out of the way, slide the lower track onto the lower section of the blind. This is how our blind should look at this point. We have the spring centered up on top and a cord sticking out of each end. Now slide your upper track into place above the top of the spring. Now reinstall the plastic caps at each end. Of course, make sure that you thread the cord through the hole in the end cap on the lower section of the blind. Now reinstall the two handles on the front of the blind and check to be sure that the cords are just about the same length on each side. If they're not, it means the spring isn't centered at the top, and you simply need to shimmy the cord through a little bit at a time to try to get the spring as centered as possible. Otherwise, the cord on one side might not reach. In preparation for reinstalling our fully reassembled blind, we're going to attach our wall anchors to the cord at each end of the lower section of the blind. Take the cord and lay it along the track on the side of the anchor, and then push the smaller section back in. Pull that all the way up to the bottom of the blind so it's fairly tight. Do this on both ends, and what this does is prevent the blind from falling open while you're installing it. Each of these clips sits inside this track at the top of the blind. So to reinstall it, simply tip the blind forward, put those clips into the track, and clip up in the back. Once the back is snapped into place, the blind is locked. Holding one cord at a time, slide the wall anchor down until it's in place, and screw it part way in. And now do the same thing on the other side. The nice part about these wall clips is that no knot is needed. When you tighten them down, they clamp down on the cord and hold it in place, making it easy to adjust. The way these cords work is, the tighter the tension is on the cord, the stiffer the blind moves. So if it falls down and doesn't stay in place, the cords need to be pulled a little bit tighter. If it's too difficult to move, the cords need to be a little looser. The goal is to have the blind move